I work at a large company, and I make enough for both of us, so you don't need to worry, Eric assured me during our engagement. However, as soon as we were married, he changed. He and Larry began to insult me daily. Additionally, Eric took over all our finances and drastically reduced our living expenses. Despite my efforts in cooking and managing the household, he constantly complained. Tired of the situation, I told Eric I wanted a divorce and left the house. Sometime later, I ran into Larry by chance. "I heard you're getting a divorce now," he said. Taken aback, I replied, "You must be confusing me with someone else." Larry smirked and retorted, "Don't pretend. We're not together anymore, so don't come to me for money. I won't give you a cent. Remember that." Before I could respond, he vanished into the crowd. I lowered my head, feeling the curious gazes of people around me, and started to laugh. Poor guy, he has no clue. I can't wait to see his reaction when he learns the truth. I'm Michelle, a 53-year-old housewife, and I've been married to Eric for 7 years. We first met at a friend's gathering, where Eric struck me as a fun and friendly guy. As we were saying our goodbyes, he asked if we could meet again, just the two of us. Feeling a bit wistful about leaving, I agreed. When we started dating, Eric told me about his son, Larry, from his previous marriage. Larry was in 5th grade at the time, and we had dinner together a few times. He was a smart and pleasant boy, much like his father. A year later, on the night Eric proposed, I decided it was time to share more about my life. "You know, I live with my parents and work part-time, right? The job I took right after college was extremely demanding, and it seriously affected my health," I confided. "Is that so? It must have been tough to leave," Eric replied. "I think long hours might be too much for me going forward," I added. Eric smiled warmly and said, "Don't worry about it. Just stay at home. I work at a large company, and I can earn enough for both of us." Comforted by his words, I accepted his proposal. I was happy to have met a good man and believed we were beginning a joyful married life. I never imagined that in less than 6 months I would feel so miserable. As we adjusted to living as a family of 3, Eric and Larry's behaviors changed significantly. They began to ridicule everything I did and said. "Mom, are you in bed again? Where's my sandwich?" Larry asked with a frown as he came into the bedroom before school. I had been helping with weeding at a nearby park yesterday and felt sick because it was an unusually hot day. I had already been feeling unwell since the day before. I had asked Eric for help, but he refused with an annoyed look and said, "Being a housewife must be nice, just slacking off all day here. I need my days off too, you know. Let me rest." The next morning, I couldn't get up because I had pushed myself too hard. I apologized to Larry and said, "Sorry, Larry, I couldn't make your sandwich. Here's some money to buy one at the grocery store." "Mom, can't you at least make a sandwich? You always take shortcuts with frozen food or leftovers. You're failing as a mom if you can't even cook," Larry complained. "Don't be hard on Mom, Larry," Eric chimed in with a smirk as he passed through the hallway. "Since you skipped the sandwich, I expect a fancy dinner tonight. Looking forward to it. You have plenty of time being a housewife, right? Not sleeping all day, are you? Make sure everything's spotless without slacking off." The two of them chuckled at my expense, leaving me feeling defeated as I lay there, unable to move. I sighed heavily. Eric, despite being a section chief at a major company with a substantial salary, was incredibly frugal. The allowance he gave me for living expenses was meager. It's my income, so why should my wife handle it? Eric insisted on managing our finances after we married, and I reluctantly agreed. At first, it seemed trivial who managed the money as long as it was handled responsibly. However, Eric soon began justifying his own extravagant purchases. "It's necessary for work. Drinking expenses are business expenses. It's essential," he would say as an excuse to buy expensive clothes and watches for himself. but he would make a sour face even if I needed something small. When I bought cheap snacks, Eric would get angry because he believed a housewife doesn't need any spending money. I had to get his approval every time I wanted to spend money, whether it was for a haircut or buying clothes, I explained. He'd question me, "Isn't one pair of jeans enough? Why do you need more?" I told him, "I need a warm pair for winter," I continued. "Fine, but find them at a cheap store," he insisted. The same went for my desire to visit the hair salon regularly. "Can I go every 3 months to maintain my hairstyle?" I asked him. Eric dismissed it, saying, "Why bother being fashionable? If you keep your hair long, you only need to trim it every 7 months. No more haircuts." Because of his tight control over our finances, I could only afford cheap makeup from drugstores. I wanted better products that wouldn't harm my skin, but Eric was indifferent. The money he allotted for living expenses was far below what most people spend, barely a third of it. With such a limited budget, maintaining a balanced diet was challenging. When I voiced my concerns, Eric would smugly reply, "On that money-saving TV show, they managed just fine. They had a farmer relative who gave them vegetables and bread." I told him, "That's not feasible with today's prices," I recalled. But he just said, "It's your responsibility to make it work." What hurt me deeply was Eric's attitude towards sending a wreath for my dad's funeral. When Dad, who had been ill, passed away and it came time to arrange for a wreath, Eric frowned and remarked, "Do we need to send a wreath for the funeral? Only the immediate family is expected to do so. Use your savings. It's not my concern." Preparing for the funeral, tears streaming down my face, his callousness stung. "I never planned to ask you for it, so don't worry," I retorted, my voice trembling with anger. "Fine, just get it done. Larry and I have to get going. This is going to ruin our long weekend, right, Dad?" Larry chimed in, showing little empathy. Despite their complaints, I expected Eric and Larry to attend. However, they arrived late to the funeral, barely greeted my mom and other relatives, and left quickly. My exhausted mom, lacking the energy to confront them, was silently dismayed, while my relatives were outraged. "What's wrong with you, Eric? Your wife's father passed away and you're behaving so coldly," they confronted him. "Larry, you've received so many gifts and allowances from Michelle's dad." As I apologized to my relatives, I felt my love for Eric and Larry waning rapidly. Eric, always impeccably dressed in stylish suits with a charming demeanor, and Larry, attending a prestigious university and regarded as a handsome young man by our neighbors, only belittled me at home. They wouldn't come straight home after work or school, instead wandering around and returning with the scent of lipstick and perfume lingering on them. Despite doing as they pleased, they treated me like a maid, demanding elaborate meals with the meager budget I had for food. When I served dishes with chicken or pork, both Eric and Larry would look at me with contempt and criticize me, I recalled. "Don't you want to cook good food for your husband when he returns from work?" Eric would taunt. "If I get sick from eating this poor quality food, who will take responsibility? Are you even capable of being a mother?" They would add. I could prepare delicious meals even with chicken or pork, but they had a strong dislike for vegetables and fish. "Eating such a limited diet will make you ill," Eric would argue. "I would eat if it were of better quality. Don't complain when you can't satisfy us." They used to eat while complaining, but recently they just left the food untouched. "Are you slacking off as a wife?" I would eat the leftovers for breakfast or lunch the next day, tears welling up as I wondered whom I was cooking for. For their meals, they relied on store-bought sandwiches, instant noodles, and snacks. Eventually, Eric was diagnosed with prediabetes during a company health check, and Larry started gaining weight. It was an inevitable consequence of their unhealthy eating habits. As I packed my clothes into a suitcase, Eric and Larry continued to talk behind me. Eric's arrogance and Larry's remarks stung deeply. What kind of wife makes her husband and child sick, We don't need someone useless like you, they hurled at me. We're getting a divorce. Then I'll leave, I replied calmly, surprising them with my swift agreement. Are you sure? You're unemployed. You've been living off me, Eric challenged. Don't worry about me. I'll send the divorce papers for you to sign later. Please leave my things until the movers come to pick them up, I responded, maintaining my composure. No one will want your things, Eric scoffed. You'll regret divorcing a high-earning, handsome guy like me, a kind husband who let you live as a housewife with 3 meals and naps. There's no one else like that in the world, right? That's right. You've been living a life of luxury on Dad's money until now. It'll be tough for you from here on, Larry added, his words cutting deep. As I listened to their words, I couldn't help but marvel at Eric's ability to overestimate himself. I used to see this arrogance as confidence and charm when we were dating. You'll just go back to your parents, right? Say hi to your retired mom for me. You two will be heading straight to poverty, Eric said. Larry laughed at his father's prediction. They'll end up on welfare soon. They already reek of poverty, but with Grandma, it'll be the ultimate, Larry agreed with Eric's derogatory remarks. Their hurtful comments stirred anger within me, but I chose not to engage. After returning home and explaining everything to Mom, she spoke softly. At the funeral? Seeing Eric and Larry, I sensed something was wrong. But I didn't want to interfere too much in my daughter's household, so I stayed silent. I was occupied with Dad's care. I apologize for intruding, I replied. It's all right. I've missed you. Why not stay here? Mom's concern was comforting, yet I feared becoming overly dependent. Thank you, but once my job is stable, I plan to move into an apartment, I assured her. Living nearby and visiting occasionally felt like the right balance. Despite Eric and Larry mocking my unemployment, I had been working from home. It started with budget recipes on my blog, which garnered positive feedback. I boldly launched a cooking site, sharing recipes that gained internet fame. Soon after, an editor from a major publisher approached me, and now I'm preparing to publish a cookbook. Due to this, I didn't have much time to think about the divorce, and the days went by. One day my phone rang insistently. I stopped stirring the ingredients in the pan and answered, "Hello? What's this about a clause for the divorce trial?" Eric asked. I sighed. "You and Larry insulted me all the time," I said. "Oh, I thought, never mind," Eric said with relief in his voice. "I didn't cheat or anything, you know. Did you record me and Larry?" "I've noted everything in my diary. Try to claim otherwise if you can." I replied, "Poor people and their obsession with money. You're so stingy if you think you can get a deposit for the divorce trial. Go ahead," Eric scoffed. After his outburst, Eric hung up. I winded up cooking and then visited a detective agency to investigate Eric's background. Soon, his affair with a coworker was exposed. The day after, I sent photos of the two of them together and the investigation report to his company. Eric's voice trembled over the phone as he spoke of the consequences of his actions being exposed. "You spreading this at work is low. The angry manager reported it to the higher-ups, and now I'm in trouble," he admitted. "I'm fired." I listened silently, absorbing the weight of his admission. "You made your choices, Eric," I finally replied, my tone firm. "Now you have to face the consequences." Eric remained silent for a moment before responding with a mix of frustration and resignation. "I never expected you to go this far," he muttered. "Oh, she was the manager's daughter, wasn't she? You shouldn't have cheated knowing they're strict about such things," I said, laughing. "But you'll be happy, right? With all the saving you did, you must be living comfortably." Larry moved into a dorm this spring because commuting was tough. I prepaid dorm fees and have apartment loans. My savings were drained by that woman. She was two-timing me with a younger guy, Eric replied. "Sounds tough for you, but it's none of my business." Oh, and about the divorce trial deposit, I'll also take half the value of the apartment for property distribution. When the invoice arrives, do transfer the full amount to my account, I said. Eric was screaming on the other end, but I hung up without caring. One day, returning from shopping, I bumped into Larry. He was dressed in his usual flashy clothes, with piercings all over his face and an eye-catching hairstyle that made him easy to spot from a distance. Seeing me, Larry raised his hand in greeting. "Hey, I've heard you're getting government assistance now." I was confused. "What? Who are you mistaking me for? Don't pretend," I said, glaring at him. "An unemployed old lady like you would end up in the hands of the government. If you had just followed me and Dad, you'd still be living a comfortable life." "But no," Larry said, smirking. I felt really angry. I couldn't help but reply, "Getting government help is a citizen's right. Anybody could need it someday due to illness or an accident. You can't judge for that." "Yeah, right. So you're saying you're getting it too?" Larry said, smirking and pointing his finger at me. "Listen, you and I are not related anymore, so don't come crying to me for money." As Larry disappeared into the bustling crowd, leaving me seething with a mix of anger and disbelief, I couldn't help but shake my head at his ignorance and arrogance. His words echoed in my mind, taunting me with their callousness. "Poor thing, he knows nothing," I muttered under my breath, a bitter chuckle escaping my lips. The passers-by glanced at me curiously, but I paid them no mind. Inside, I was seething with frustration and hurt at Larry's cruel words, yet there was a small ember of satisfaction, knowing that soon he would learn the truth. A few days later, I woke up to find a lot of missed calls from Larry as I called back. Larry shouted furiously, "You deceived me, old woman." Larry's furious tirade echoed through the phone, his voice laced with disbelief and anger at the revelations I calmly disclosed. His accusations and threats washed over me, but I remained steadfast in my response. "It's not me, but Eric who is receiving it," I repeated firmly, countering Larry's misguided assumptions about my financial status. The line fell momentarily silent as Larry processed my words. I could almost picture his face contorted in frustration on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his tone had softened, albeit reluctantly. "What I told you last time, it's not me," I explained patiently, as if unraveling a complex puzzle for a child. "I inherited those properties from Grandpa, and they are my assets. I knew about them from Dad's will, but I delayed the transfer until after the divorce to ensure they stayed with me." As I continued to explain the situation, detailing Eric's financial struggles and my sources of income from my cooking website and book sales, Larry's outburst resumed with renewed vigor. His accusations and insults came fast and furious, each one reflecting his shock and anger at the unraveling reality. "Dad's on government assistance now," I concluded matter-of-factly, pulling the phone slightly away from my ear to shield myself from Larry's escalating shouts. Larry's resentful tone pierced through the silence that followed my blunt response. His accusations of my supposed cold-heartedness echoed in my mind, but I remained resolute in my stance. "You're cold-hearted. After all Dad did for you, you have no intention of repaying him. If you have money, you should give some to Dad," Larry retorted bitterly. "Why should I?" I shot back firmly, my tone unyielding. "Since our marriage, it's been nothing but unpleasant memories." "I don't feel like I owe him anything," I stated coldly, refusing to be swayed by Larry's attempt to guilt-trip me. Larry's voice wavered slightly as he tried to justify his own position. "I don't have savings. The part-time pay goes to hanging out with friends and stuff," he admitted evasively. I couldn't help but smirk at his admission. "You've been living quite lavishly for a student. Borrowing money to hang out at clubs is not a good idea," I remarked pointedly, highlighting the irony of his spending habits compared to his plea for financial responsibility. There was a pregnant pause on the other end of the line as Larry processed my words. I could almost sense his frustration and embarrassment through the phone. "How do you know that?" he asked. "A few days ago, I saw you from across the street after we parted. You met up with a girl at a club and went to a brand store arm in arm. Also, a club membership card was left at the house. Using my credit card for shopping without my permission is out of the question," I replied calmly. Larry stammered, "That's wrong. You got high-rise apartments from Grandpa. Me and Dad should get a share. This is discrimination." "Yeah, whatever. And by the way, credit card bill will be sent soon. Make sure you pay it before it's due," I replied, before the call disconnected. I sighed and ended the call. Just when I thought it was all over, months later, Eric and Larry showed up at my parents' house without informing me. The doorbell rang non-stop, and when I answered, I got to know that they actually came to ask for money. I let them in to avoid causing a scene in the neighborhood. Eric and Larry, who used to look so fancy, now appeared completely different, wearing wrinkled shirts and dirty pants with sunken eyes. Yet they still had the energy to be sarcastic. As they walked into the living room, Eric looked around and scoffed. "Same old house, huh? Why not sell one of those high-rise apartments and fix this place? At least do something nice for Mom. You're just living miserably on her pension. This is my dad's house and we like it this way. More importantly, when are you two planning to pay me back? You're past the deadline." I went straight to the point. Eric said, lifting his chin arrogantly, "I'll forgive you now, so let's remark. You started a cooking site, right? And if you manage the household perfectly, I'll even let you work. So come back. Such a generous dad forgiving the wife who abandoned her husband and child." "So, Mom, why not come back to Dad again? Living with just two women must be insecure." Stunned, I was speechless. After a moment, intense anger welled up inside me on Larry's words. "Don't joke with me. Do you think you can go around and make fun of me?" I shouted at the astonished Eric and Larry. "After treating me like a housekeeper, insulting me, not providing proper living expenses, and even kicking me out, now you are here to take me back because you found out I inherited high-rise apartments. Never. So what, you're going to abandon us? Rich people are stingy, knowing we're struggling with money and still demanding pay. You're heartless. You were poor before, and just now you got money. Don't get cocky," Eric retorted in the middle of the argument. Mom came back from shopping. Eric and Larry immediately started buttering her up. "Please lend us some money. We'll pay it back. Besides, it's unfair that only Michelle gets Grandpa's inheritance. We want one high-rise apartment as well," Eric pleaded. "Hello, Grandma. It's been so long since I've seen you. How are you, Grandma? Please tell Mom to remarry Dad. He want to live with her, but Mom is being stubborn." Mom, surprised at first, changed her expression upon hearing their words. She placed her shopping bag on the floor and let out a deep breath. "So embarrassing, both of you," she said. "Huh?" Eric and Larry responded, confused. "I'm telling you to have some shame," Mom shouted suddenly, startled by her loud voice. Eric and Larry were shocked. Mom usually never raised her voice at them. "I've heard everything from Michelle. I can't believe you guys have the guts to show up here," Mom said firmly. No, Michelle's exaggerating. At least listen to our side, too," Eric said quickly. "Dad's right, Grandma. Mom is lying," Larry added. "I remember how well you both behaved at my husband's funeral," Mom cut off Larry's words sternly. "Not me, nor greeting the relatives, yawning throughout the day, and leaving even before the coffin was sent off. And now you dare ask for his inheritance? Don't ever come back." She rushed Eric and Larry to the front door and glared at them one last time. "You two are nothing but strangers to us. I don't want to see here ever again, and if I do, I'll call the police." Mom threw their shoes out the door, forcing them to leave in their socks, and immediately locked the front door. Eric, who had been avoiding paying me, was advised by his lawyer that a lawsuit would cost even more. Ultimately, He finally transferred the money to my account. Even though Eric was fired from his job, he couldn't find another one. His parents, after hearing about his situation from relatives, stepped in to cover his debts. They visited my parents' house and apologized profusely for Eric's behavior. Later, Eric, having given up on finding a new job, returned to the countryside, acting like he was helping with the family's farming. However, the story of our divorce had already spread through the village, leading both children and elders to point and laugh at him. There's thrifty Uncle Eric, even with a degree from a good university and a job at a big company. What's the use if your wife leaves you for being too arrogant, they would say. The reason for his divorce was all about his reckless spending. He'll never change. Being mocked by the villagers was embarrassing. Eric kept sending me persistent messages asking to remarry to save face, but I deleted his contact. His twink was no longer interested after the money ran out and had left him. I found her with the detective's help and made sure she paid the divorce trial security deposit. I also made Larry pay back the money he used on the credit card without permission. Even though he was enrolled in a prestigious university and was on track to become successful like his father, Larry skipped classes and started fooling around, leading to failing grades and eventually getting expelled. His friends and girlfriends were worried, but Larry, in his arrogance, pushed them away with his prideful comments. He then had a big fight with Eric, saying, "What kind of father you are if you won't help your son pay off the debt?" Now, they don't talk to each other. Larry lives alone in a small apartment, getting by with part-time jobs. Gone are the days of buying whatever he wanted and making sarcastic remarks. Despite the challenges in my past marriage, life has taken a positive turn for me. My cooking website is thriving, and I've recently signed a book deal. I now live on the top floor of the high-rise apartment I inherited from Dad. It's conveniently close to our family home, which is great for Mom, who is still healthy at 75. I'm planning a surprise hot spring trip for Mom's upcoming birthday. Even though my marriage didn't work out, maintaining a strong relationship with Mom is important to me. Living nearby allows me to be there for her whenever